So, Josh, of all the stuff that has happened over the last 48 hours, and it has been a wild couple of days here, was that the most definitive thing that we have found out over since Monday?
Oh, well, definitely. And I think the other thing that it clearly tells us is he said Sam Bradford's the number one, Chase Daniel's the number two, and we're still looking for number three. And I'm sitting there like, is Mark Sanchez still on the roster? Like, did I miss something? So I think it's very clear that Mark Sanchez will be cut to save that $3.5 million against the 2016 cap if they are unable to trade him. The quarterback structure is definitely the clearest thing that we found out in the last couple of days. Brandon Brooks, Doug Peterson also specified that Brandon Brooks would play right guard as he did in Houston. So that seems like a spot on the offensive line that's shored up. But, of course, you still have left guard that you still need to address.
So are you selling or buying about Chase Daniel and his arrival in Philadelphia?
I'm completely buying it. I mean, the one thing that people talk about is, well, why are you paying Chase Daniel $7 million to be a backup? Well, I think there are two parts to it. A, Sam Bradford's going to be making $18 million at least. So I don't really think the money is in Chase Daniel's favor, saying, okay, well, if they're paying him this much money, maybe he could be the starter. But the reason I do think they're paying him that much money is because of the uncertainty with Sam Bradford. We don't know if Sam Bradford is going to be here in 2017. It's going to be basically after the first year of Sam Bradford's deal, they're either going to cut him if it doesn't work out or restructure his deal. But because of that uncertainty, the Eagles don't know who the quarterback could be in 2017. So Chase Daniel could be the starter in 2017 if Sam Bradford doesn't work out this year. And, of course, you have the possibility of Chase Daniel having to step in with Sam Bradford's injury history.
So you buy in then what he said about Bradford being the clear number one?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So are you buying then that they were not listening to – they're not entertaining any calls for Bradford?
Well, I think I thought that to make a blanket statement like that was interesting because – realistically, there are only a few people in the NFL who just teams would not trade. Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, guys like that. When you have Sam Bradford, I completely believe that they aren't actively trading him. But if someone were to come to the Eagles and say, "Hey, we're going to offer you a first-round pick," I would be, it's those types of deals the Eagles would definitely entertain. But I do believe that they aren't actively shopping him. They aren't trying to get rid of him. I don't foresee them trading him. I'd be surprised if they did. Just in general, if Sam Bradford is not the starting quarterback week one, barring an injury, I would be very surprised about that if he would not be the starter.
Josh Buono with us. Josh, which of the free agent guys that have come in then do you like the best? Which is the one that you go, oh, yeah, that's the one?
Well, either McLeod or Brooks. I really like Brooks just because of how much of a need the offensive line is. And he's really a type of guy that I think he really shows the difference between Chip Kelly and, the Howie Roseman / Doug Peterson type of evaluation. Doug Peterson flatly said, Brandon Brooks is not the prototypical right guard, meaning in terms of size. He's 6'5", maybe weighs a little more than the prototypical guard would be. But he said, you know what, it really doesn't matter what his measurements are because, quite simply, he's one of the best offensive linemen out there in free agency. He's going to be a very good run blocker for them. I think he's going to be a guy that's really going to give a significant upgrade from Matt Tobin and what they've had now. And then they can get a guard in the draft to shore up that left side. So I think that Brooks, I also think he's going to be the type of guy that Philly loves. He's kind of the aggressive, rugged. He's just going to be the workman-like guy who just wants to get the job done, physical. So I think he was a big signing.
Three guys in these signings that played for Jim Schwartz when he was the defensive coordinator in Buffalo. Josh, what do you think the factor is that Coach Schwartz is going to be the DC here in Philadelphia on attracting these free agents?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just the familiarity on both sides of it. These guys, they can come in, and it'll be, one of the easiest transitions from them having to go to another team. They go to a guy who they played for only one season, but still you're familiar with terminology, the team. And then on the Eagles side of it, with Jim Schwartz, they talk about a collaborative effort with how they're going to approach things with personnel. But obviously when you have a guy in the building like Jim Schwartz who has coached a guy and been around these guys for at least a year, he can really speak authoritatively on their abilities, on their potential. So on both sides, it's a good fit because all three of these guys, the other thing with these three guys, they all had their best seasons under Jim Schwartz. They played under multiple defenses in Buffalo. Many of them played, I think, at least 3 defenses in Buffalo, and the one that they fit best in was the Jim Schwartz scheme. So on both sides, the familiarity is a big fit.
Josh Thornhill, Birds, 24/7 over at PhillyMag.com. Josh, let me ask you, one of the things, too, that was said today was, really talking about the guys that they traded. And I know Jeff McClain tried as hard as he could to try to get him to kind of, say, you just didn't want these particular. I can't imagine, Josh, that they called the Dolphins and said, hey, are you interested in, that the Dolphins call them and say, hey, are you guys interested in giving up Maxwell? I mean, Howie Roseman had to have been calling about those particular players, right?
Oh, yeah, I think it's pretty clear that the Eagles are trying to get rid of those contracts and that they were actively shopping those guys. I mean, that's kind of going back to the question about Bradford. That's the difference of, you have Bradford where you may listen to offers, but you aren't actively trying to get rid of him. Byron Maxwell, DeMarco Murray are the opposite. Those are the guys you want to get those contracts off the books, and maybe you want to get DeMarco Murray out of the locker room because, as it was well documented, he wasn't very happy in Philadelphia. So those are definitely 2 instances of guys where you want to get them out, not really for what you can get back, but just so you can get them off the books. And the DeMarco Murray trade really in particular, I mean, kind of exemplifies that. You get what? You move up 13 spots in the 4th round, or about 13 spots. I mean, that's not much compensation-wise, but the big thing is just getting those guys out of Philadelphia.
All right, Josh, let me get your assessment then of the deals that Howie Roseman made in the end. Murray, he flips sports, moves up 13 spots there. He flips from 13 to 8. I've heard nobody say a negative thing. It almost feels like it's too good to be true. Was this a bad deal, or are you with everybody else?
Yeah, I was very surprised when I first heard about the prospective swapping first rounds and moving up to number 8, because I was just thinking, why in the world, if you're the Dolphins, would you want to not only take on these contracts, this contract, but also give up a top 10 pick? And you're only moving back 5 spots, but still, to be able to move from number 13 to number 8 and getting that Maxwell contract off the books, I was surprised. I mean, I thought it was a very good move by Howie. I honestly didn't really understand the move from the other perspective, and those are kind of the instances where you really think the Eagles kind of pulled one over on other teams, where you really can't understand the other side of it. There are a lot of deals where you can see both sides of it, like the Buffalo deal at the time. You could see clearing the cap space would be good, and Buffalo would get a good running back with Sean McCoy. But these deals the Eagles made, it seemed like they were lopsided in favor of the Eagles.
Yeah, lopsided in favor of the Eagles, Pete, and we've been talking about that throughout the week. That's been really the thing, is that
Monty Hall, let's make a deal.
Yeah, and it's like
unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's like the deals are almost all of them, like they've been active, Josh, which is kind of like you're like, oh, the good teams aren't active in free agency, but the Eagles have been over the last couple of years. It hasn't worked out. But why should we have a better feeling about this year's activity?
Well, unfortunately, the biggest reason to feel good is because the deals last offseason were so bad, just really undoing.
But we were excited about them. But we were excited about them last. Weren't fans excited about the deals they made last year too? Although I hated them.
They were absolutely excited. But I think what is good about these deals, I mean, mostly just undoing last year's problems, and because I think that now you can pretty clearly see that the DeMarco Murray contract and the Byron Maxwell contract were not good for the Eagles. So I think the 2 best things the Eagles have done were getting those contracts off the books, getting those guys off the team. So it's not necessarily what the free agents they brought in is the best part, but just addition by subtraction and getting rid of the guys that really weren't very good for you and didn't seem to have a good future in Philadelphia.
Josh, one of the things that Mike and I have talked about on the air and we've talked about off the air is guys that they may still target, maybe an offensive lineman, maybe a receiver. I thought Doug Peterson's answer today about veteran wide receiver help was interesting at best. How did you view that answer, and what do you think? I mean, who would you like to see them bring in if they do bring a veteran wide receiver in?
Yeah, and the wide receivers, I thought that was interesting because that was something that Doug Peterson implied, much stronger early on that they would want to bring in a veteran receiver. I think Rashard Matthews is a guy that they would have liked to have, but the price tag was just too big. I think that the reason that they haven't gotten a receiver yet, and the reason I wouldn't be surprised if they don't get a veteran receiver, is just because the wide receiver free agency class is weak. And so all the guys that you see getting deals, especially the top of the market, like a Matthews, they're going to get overpaid. So I think the Eagles are trying to be shrewd in those areas of not necessarily targeting the top end of the market and maybe wait for the secondary markets to develop. But the problem is, how much these guys at the top of the market are going to get paid, it's going to really kind of seep below. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Eagles don't get a veteran receiver, not because they don't need one, but it would absolutely benefit them to get a guy who has more than 2 years of experience, like Jordan Matthews and Josh Huff, the most experienced guys in this group. It's kind of crazy, but I think the money that the wide receivers in this market are demanding would be too high just because their class is so thin and they're more likely to get overpaid.
All right, busy week, a lot of moves, and Josh Pawnell and Birds 24/7 over at Philly Mag has it all covered for you. And, of course, Josh, every Thursday, as soon as the football season slows down, we'll give him a break, right? But it never slows down, man.
That's going to happen.
Josh, always a pleasure, pal.
Thanks for having me, guys.